beginning of 1941, Moscow is the only great European capital not yet at war. Paris, Brussels and Warsaw are occupied, London under bombardment, Berlin mobilized. But in Moscow, spring comes in peacefully. For several months, the atmosphere is relaxed. The great political purge has been achieved, and copies of the third five-year plan fill the bookshops. The Muscovites have begun the new year full of confidence, even though on the other side of Europe, the imperialistic war grinds on. Besides, since the division of Poland and the annexation of the Baltic states, the frontier is a long way off. The Germans are 600 miles from the capital. In case of danger, the Red Army is always there, powerful, doubtless invincible. Anyhow, why should there be danger? Stalin, with some skill, has signed a pact with Hitler, thus saving the peace. On November the 12th, 1940, Molotov, Stalin's right-hand man, arrives in Berlin, welcomed with great ceremony. Hitler proposes dividing up the British Empire, since on all the evidence, England is going to be overwhelmed. Molotov demands explanations. What are the Germans going to do about Romania and Finland? And why is Hitler so concerned with Bulgaria, Turkey and the Balkans? All this is very suspicious. Schmidt, Hitler's interpreter, is worried. No one has ever taken this tone with the Führer. The conference achieves nothing, and Molotov, filled with doubts, returns to Moscow. It's true that apparently nothing has changed. There are strange sights, like that of General Guderian, creator of the German armored forces, reviewing Soviet tanks and thinking of what is to come. Hitler, in fact, pursues his policy of diplomatic encirclement unceasingly in the newly adherent countries, who signed the Anti-Comintern Pact. Defiant Yugoslavia is bombarded and occupied in a few weeks. So is Greece. The links with Spain, Italy, Hungary, Romania and Bulgaria are strengthened. At the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, von Ribbentrop is very busy in the name of the Führer. Signing sessions follow each other in quick succession, more than 10 pacts between 1940 and May 1941. At the other end of the world, a little man is getting ready to leave for Europe. Yosuke Matsuoka, Japan's foreign minister, has meetings arranged with Hitler and Stalin. According to which agreements he signs, one will know on whose side destiny leans. Mr. Matsuoka is accompanied to the railway station by all those Tokyo-based German diplomats. Among them is the ambassador's press attaché, Richard Sorge, Nazi double agent and true communist, Stalin's #1 spy. From Tokyo, Sorge, who signs his messages Ramsay, tells the Kremlin everything. In this text of 25th of March 1941, for example, the German offensive against the USSR will begin in the second half of June. The strongest attack will come from the German left wing. Stalin, although told, doesn't believe it. Meanwhile, Mr. Matsuoka carries on. In Berlin, Hitler sounds him out. What will Japan do if by any chance war breaks out between the Reich and the USSR? Politely, Mr. Matsuoka steals away. 2 days later, on the 13th of April 1941, Matsuoka is in Moscow, where he signs a non-aggression pact between the Soviet Union and Japan. Stalin is delighted. He will not have to make war on two fronts. At last, Hitler has made his decision. Since the summer of 1940, he has dreamt of a great campaign, the greatest war of all time. His generals, when consulted, have scarcely time to raise objections before Operation Barbarossa takes shape. On June the 22nd, 1941, at 3:30 in the morning, without a declaration of war, the Wehrmacht enters Soviet territory. The assault troops throw footbridges across the river Bug. the frontier posts are taken, the barbed wire cut. At daybreak on June the 22nd, German Stukas bombard the 66 Soviet airfields continuously. The old Rata fighters of the Soviet Air Force try in vain to oppose the Luftwaffe, but they're hopelessly outclassed by the Messerschmitts. By midday on June the 22nd, 1,200 Russian planes have been destroyed, 800 of them on the ground. The Luftwaffe has made certain of air supremacy for several months at least. From Cape North in the Arctic to the Black Sea in the south, 153 German divisions move off to the east, towards Moscow. In front of the panzers, the Great Plain opens out, thousands of miles of forest, prairie, and small villages, swept by the wind of the Russian steppes. The Soviet army is taken completely by surprise. The frontier troops are alerted only 2 hours before the attack and haven't time to organize themselves. No proper plans have been made in case of invasion. At some points, the Germans meet no resistance at all. At others, resistance is bitter, but to no avail. During the first 24 hours, the German advance guard covers 40 to 60 miles. But the old fortress of Brest-Litovsk on the River Bug is going to give the Wehrmacht a foretaste of what the Russian campaign will eventually become. Several hundred Russian soldiers are trapped, together with some civilians, under the command of a captain and a political commissar. It takes more than a month for 4 German divisions to subdue them. The garrison finally succumbs, but not without leaving a message. We are dying, but not surrendering. Goodbye, my country. In Moscow, it's general mobilization for 15 million Russians. Those on home leave, surprised by the German attack, hastily rejoin their regiments. All the existing units the Soviet command can find are sent promptly to the front with the order to counterattack, because the Soviet military doctrine only admits the offensive. But this is not the only drawback they have to face. Obsolete tanks and badly camouflaged columns move up towards the front. Their limited experience of modern warfare is no match for the German techniques. Retreat is inevitable, and little by little, White Russia has to be abandoned to the invader. Stalin intervenes on July the 3rd and gives the order for a scorched earth policy, a terrible admission.
Comrades, citizens, brothers and sisters, I speak to you, my friends.
Never had one heard such words from the mouth of the feared Georgian, who proclaims,
"The enemy must not find a single machine, a single wagon, a piece of bread, or a can of petrol. Shepherds must remove all their flocks."
This sort of frenzy of burning, as from the tragic past, seizes the people. As against the invasion of Teutonic horsemen and against Napoleon, they set fire to their own homes. The earth is scorched. The Germans advance into a desert of bonfire and ashes, towards a horizon of flames which seems to go on forever. Advancing towards Minsk, 3,500 German tanks in long grey columns are set loose in the plain. Behind the panzers march the infantry, drunk with singing and sun. In these immense open spaces, the war is infrequent, but there are battles for roads and villages with the crash of artillery and the grinding of tank tracks. Great encircling movements are developed by the Germans, which succeed in wiping out entire Russian armies. Few succeed in getting out of the trap, but some are lucky. These Russian tanks and trucks manage to escape by running the gauntlet of the German infantry and anti-tank units. Others, not so fortunate, swell the ranks of the prisoners who will soon be suffering the fate of Nazi policy. An order of Hitler's stipulates that communists and political commissars be executed in the field. This order is often ignored by the army at the front, but the SS in the rear areas take it upon themselves to apply it. In this manner, hundreds of thousands of Russian prisoners die, executed or starved to death. Among them, Stalin's son-in-law. The German armored troops, after a 120-mile breakthrough, enter devastated Minsk, the first big town on the road to Moscow. At the beginning of July, the cavalry crosses the Berezina. The advance proceeds, marked by brief and violent fighting. The taking of Vitebsk is announced by German military fanfares. The panzers are now driving towards Smolensk, where Russian fortunes are about to change. Outside Smolensk, the Soviets produced some secret weapons. The terrifying Stalin organ that the Russian soldiers call Katusha, after their favorite song. 36 rockets launched from a truck. The T-34 tanks are also seen for the first time. More heavily armored and faster than German panzers, the T-34 is probably the best tank of the Second World War. But numerically, the Germans still hold the advantage. The fight for Smolensk is going to last 3 weeks. The town has to be taken by hand-to-hand fighting. In spite of the efforts of the German propagandists, the Russian soldiers resist to the end. Communiques are always triumphant, but German Supreme Headquarters knows that the Wehrmacht has already lost 100,000 dead and 300,000 wounded or missing. That's more than 10% of the total force sent out on June the 22nd. The equipment is worn out, but less so than the troops. Operation Barbarossa begins to slow down. Hitler feels that something somewhere is getting out of hand. In his personal Junkers, he flies to Minsk to look over the ruins. It is at this moment that Hitler feels he has a better understanding of military necessities than his general staff, and he decides to take matters into his own hands. The conduct of the Russian campaign will never be the same again. The troops acclaim him, but the generals are apprehensive of this meeting. A troubled conference is held in front of the map. The generals feel that the only thing to do is to swoop down on Moscow, which is only 210 miles away. For Hitler, on the contrary, Moscow is only a symbol. The objective must be changed. What counts is the Ukraine, with its reserves of wheat. Ukraine, which will feed the Reich. In the middle of August 1941, he alters course, turns the armed columns away from Moscow and moves them southward, despite the protests of the General Staff. But it's above all the partisan movement that expresses the will to resist the German invasion. Many soldiers who escaped capture in the pockets of Minsk and Smolensk take up with the underground movement in the impenetrable forests of White Russia. For the Germans, the danger is deadly. It weighs on their lines of communication, and still more on their morale. In the forests, death can come at them from all sides. To liquidate the underground, special detachments under the SS are set up and immediately distinguish themselves by their ruthless brutality. The Russian campaign takes on overtones of hatred. There are innumerable volunteers. Sometimes they're very young people, often mature men. The war has become the business of all the Russian people. Men and women flood in to serve in any way they can. Vintage equipment is used to train the raw recruits, and government posters promise better material to come. But the most extraordinary effort is in industry. 1,500 factories have been hastily moved from threatened areas. Thousands of trains have carried them hundreds of miles towards the Urals and Siberia. And some weeks later, the men and women work again for the Red Army. The Germans are going to learn that the Soviet Union is also a great industrial power. On the same day as the German invasion of Russia, Churchill from London offers Stalin the help of Great Britain. Some weeks later, Sir Stafford Cripps, British ambassador to Moscow, signs an aid treaty. The same agreement will be signed soon with Averell Harriman, special envoy from Roosevelt. Almost immediately, thousands of tons of war equipment leave the British ports. To get to Murmansk, the convoys must run the blockade of the German U-boats in the icy seas. But as time passes and the Ukraine is conquered,